In this video, I will show you again all the different steps we took yesterday to take the basic bench from the chair's structure video and then add all these other structural elements. For example, the trimmed ribs in between, which are white, and then all the structural elements. For example, here we need to have for the pipe to go in. So the two elements which will be very important to understand from this project is, again, the whole idea of parametric and with Blender specifically generative modeling, because a lot of these details we don't really have and we basically deal with one big block, but then with the modifiers, and because we share the mesh data, we can quickly generate different shapes without having to build each one step by step by hand. And then also how we can use the Boolean operations, so volume operations like add a volume, remove a volume, find the intersecting volume, to create then the shapes we need, because you always want to use a tool or a step which is very effective and easy to control and not too complicated. Because I could build everything by hand, or I could simply work with the volumes and then calculate them against each other and let the software create the shapes for me. Okay. I have already prepared a basic scene here, which I will hand out to you. So there we are. So again, this is basically the first step. So here we have our main object. A few suggestions. I totally give every object a proper name. So for example, these are the ribs. So array full ribs. This is, for example, just a spacer. This is my core object. And then here, the modifiers, they also have logical names. So for example, this is the Boolean that does the core. This is the Boolean that does the array. Okay, good. So I would like to create the ribs that I want to put in between, not outside, but only in between. So that means I need to have an array system that's actually just in that space. So we can, for example, give this a name as well. Let's say array, array cube, perfect. And then I will now do an Alt D and escape and say this is actually array trimmed ribs. Okay, good. So you see actually that this array, or the original array we used to cut the space out of this bigger part. So we used the solid command difference or cut. Now in this new object, instead of cutting, so removing, we actually want to only maintain what's inside these boxes. But I said that actually I only want the ribs which are inside these empty spaces and not on the outside. So I have to adjust the array for this object. So I'll move this onto a different layer so they don't overlap. Let's say there. And I can use this object for snapping. Hold on, I have a bevel command. I will turn this off there. So I can snap this one to there. Because they all use the same blocks, you see it perfectly fits in between. And if I take a look at the end, there we see I have too many. So I can remove two. Perfect. So this is now defining actually the space between these ribs. Now when I select this object, Alt D again, make a link and escape. Let's move this to layer 3. There you see now currently this object cuts out the full ribs. I could say here cut out just these new ribs. And you see it removed the volume, and there again we have the issue of the caps, etc. And this also occupies the same space, as you can see, so not ideal. But to fix this, the difference we simply set to intersect, because, well, that's what we want. I want to just find the volume that fits there in between. There. Perfect. See? Not very difficult. We also would like to cut a certain amount away, so we can create a plane. Where did the plane go to? There. Location to the 0, cursor to selected, top view in edit mode. We can scale this and move this up. And this one I move down a little bit, so I overbuild. Perfect. Make sure everything looks to the outside. Control N. I have to turn on my screen keys. Where are they? There. Okay. Let's give this a good name. So logically, in my case, it makes sense. So half or rib trim. Or for example, half rib trim. Okay. We can push this to this layer so it's gone. And then here I will add now another Boolean modifier at the end. This time difference. Trim, there is my half ribbed trim object. And there everything is nicely cut. Pretty easy. Can maybe give this also a different material. You see I set this already to object, so I can easily give now these objects new materials. And here object, and let's say here, let me make this orange. There, perfect. Okay, because this is not really a wood object. This is actually, how could I say that? Because it's so organic, it's more a plastic part. So we can injection mold this obviously, but we can't really bend this one out of wood so easily. Or we could CNC mill it, and that would work. The main reason why I say this, you see we have all these nice curves here. So that actually makes working or creating this out of wood a little bit more complicated, but plastic is fine. So because we deal with plastic in this case, we can easily then just work with a material per object, not per face, because we're not texturing a specific face. Good. So how do we do the pipe stuff? Well, let's go back maybe to our part here. So nicely everything is symmetrical. So Shift S cursor to the center. Then we can make a circle in top view, or we can do this actually in this view. Press T, go to the circle area. We want to maybe set this to, well, we can set this to 12, maybe 3 centimeters. Let's make 4 centimeters diameter. Just rotate this one Y 90 degrees. Let's maybe make this 5, let's say 6 centimeters, so it's a little bit stronger. Okay, and then we don't move it to the position, but we can move the object up, and then in edit mode I move this over. Why did I do this? Well, because if I add a mirror modifier, which by default works over the object's object center point. There you see now this way I mirror it over its own kind of like center point, and I don't have to use an array modifier. Perfect. I can move this a little bit down maybe, or there. Good. So we need to extrude this one out. So E, we can push it out, but be careful how we extrude it. So in my case I have to press X for the correct direction. Shift E and 1 to crease this edge, and then we can press F to fill it. Perfect. And for the mirror command, here also turn on X, so wait, or Z, so it goes to the other direction. Now I don't really like this X, Y, Z stuff, so we could, for example, apply the rotation, because we rotated the object when we turned in 90 degrees for the rotation. So now here, Z and X I can adjust. Okay, now this works a little bit better. Perfect. Good. Maybe a subdivision level at this point of 1 or 2. Don't have to use too many. 1 will be a tick faster. For the moment, that's fine. Great. Okay, so this is kind of like defining the space of a material I would like to be attached under each rib. But you see that this pipe runs through, well, from the left to the right and also through the empty space. So how could I add this? Well, one way would be to simply cut away all the areas of the pipe I don't need and then add it to this. Technically speaking, works. It's just really complicated. There's a much better or more efficient way, and that is simply because we have this big block, and this big block we core out with our core object. There. We could simply remove this pipe from the core object. So here I will move this one to this layer so you can see it. Let's rename this one into maybe something that makes sense. So maybe pipe flash, and I use the term flash simply because it's added material. There. And then here we will add now another Boolean modifier, or actually not another, a first one, difference, and then pipe flash, and we cut it out. Perfect. So because now this core object has the geometry of the pipe cut out, and we use then this to cut out its volume out of our ribs, we end up with all the material still there. So instead of just cutting everything away and then adding something to it, well, we simply only cut away what we actually only need. So I hope that this actually makes sense. Okay, perfect. So now we have to do exactly the same to here. And actually, you see, we don't, because it's already automatically done, because this one, well, uses the same core object to cut out. So pretty fantastic. So now we could go to here, and for example, we could Shift D, make a copy. This I will stretch out a little bit, and I would like to adjust the diameter a little bit more. So I set this to this is all off. So Y and Z. So let's say 8 centimeters and 8 centimeters. And you noticed, yikes. The scaling works, but actually it moves its direction. So that's not really very good. And that is because we used this small trick that actually our object center point is at the world center point. So if we want to just scale the pipe where it is, unfortunately in this case we would have to re-center the object center point to the center of the pipe. There, okay, but now you see one of the mirror elements is gone. That's not a big deal. You know what we will do? Instead of using its own mirror object, we can still make use of this one. But let's say at one point we want to change the diameter here as well. Shoot, then we run into the same issue there as well. So at this position now, I, in this case, have to create a small empty. As much as I hate it, because it's an additional part, but it will make life a lot easier. So then here for the bigger pipe, the flash one, we also reset the point, so later we can easily adjust the proportions. So now here 8 centimeters. Let's maybe make 7 centimeters and 7. I noticed something funny is happening there. See this crease there? Let me for a moment figure out what's going on. Ah, I know why. Oh, I forgot to set this yet. Jing, there. Okay, and here we also need to do this, and there it's mirrored over. Okay, perfect. Good. Now we have the dimensions. Also, before we continue, let me turn off this one for a second, because I want you to see when we turn on the subdivision, the numbers change. So let's say we really want to have 7 centimeters, then actually we should scale this one in object mode when having the subdivision turned on. Maybe kind of like a level 3 or 4, so it's nice and big. So then S and Shift X, because the X-axis we don't really need. We only want to adjust Z and Y, and with Shift, there we can scale this to 7. Perfect. Now we can push this back to 2, so it renders quicker. You see it's a little bit off, but that's fine, because later when we bring this into Fusion, this will be very, very clean. Maybe one more adjustment, so it's really spot 7. Could also type this actually in 7 centimeters. There. Apply the scale to here. Let's turn the mirror off. Now we could say this should be really 12 centimeters. Okay. And to apply scale, turn the mirror back on. Okay. Again, and the main reason why I did this in Fusion, we only have fully smooth or blocky. And in all other programs that use a subdivision, you see we just add more faces to make it nice and round. So because in Fusion it's super smooth and precise, that's the reason why for the sizing I set this to 6, adjust the number, and then later bring it back. And this way I know I'm pretty close to what I need when I bring the data over to Fusion. Okay, so let's call this one pipe body. Oh, actually this is the core, because we cut it out. Okay, so How do we do this? Well, we could go to this one and add another modifier and cut it out. But I think this will work as well, because this is just a volume, and we can go to Boolean. This time we say union and pipe core. See, we just added actually to this volume, and if I'm not mistaken, there we are. So you see it cuts actually both objects at once. So I saved myself the step of adding to each object another Boolean operation. You also here see sometimes this funny stuff can happen. So sometimes you need to show the array that does the slicing, and then everything is peachy again. So here we do the same. Thank you. Perfect. There we are. Pretty cool. So that's really good. Okay, so the next step we want to do is add the pipe in between. So let's do a quick exercise. So maybe here this I hide. Where are my, there are these pipes, okay. They will be very useful for me. So I want, for example, my pipe to start right at the center of these pipes. So my object center is there, cursor to selected, and then I can add a Bezier. In edit mode, set everything to vector, and then this one I say selection to cursor. Perfect. And this one I can move out. And I want to move this one out only as far as, for example, this outer shell grows. There. So I show this object, snapping to points, G and X, and snap to there. Perfect. Good. So how do I get this one over now? I can select this point, E and Y. But now I need to figure out, how can I perfectly bring this over? So here's a little trick. I can, for example, select this point, cursor to selected, and then I go to 3D cursor. This is Y. This is on -32. If I adjust this number, you see I moved my cursor to the other side, because I don't have geometry there to snap. So selection to cursor, and there I am. Then I can make another E and X, and now this one I would like to snap right to the center. So cursor to selected, there. Also here, move over to the other side, and then there, selection to cursor. Perfect. So you see that was pretty easy. Let's move this one to layer 4. Okay, we want this one to arc out nicely. So here we need to have 2 cuts. Then these cuts we can move to there. You, set to aligned. Now you see this is way too small, so maybe we can bend those out a little bit to get nice transitions. Yeah, like this. Okay. So dimensionings for the pipes. Where are my pipe objects? What did we say here? I think this was 7. Okay. Somewhere now we can create another circle and say 7 centimeters, 7 centimeters, and let's call this one 7 centimeter pipe cross section. Okay, because in this one we can give this as the pipe. Then we have to pay attention to, based on the size of the diameter, can I arc this correctly? For example, if we move this one in and there you can see it pinches, so that's not good. Okay, let's take a look at how this all lines up. This looks pretty good. Alt B, interesting function. We can draw an interactive cut section. So you see this perfectly fits in. Good. Literally has no tolerance, so maybe this should be a tiny tick smaller, or for example the hole we cut can be a tiny tick bigger. But for the moment, at this stage in the semester, we can ignore tolerances. But essentially you can memorize it as well. If we have one pipe, another pipe has to go in, or elements, you want to have a tiny space so the elements don't wiggle or move, but it's easy to move them through. So sometimes you don't work with the exact dimension. The hole can be a tick bigger than the element that is being inserted. Okay, this all looks pretty good. Maybe 64 to make the pipe nice and round. If we want to play a little bit, we can move this one down. There's, it's not so boringly flat. Arcs a little bit. So you see 3D pipes are very, very easy and fast with the spline tool. That would be great in case actually in Fusion you could do pipes with the same ease in 3D Sketch. But again, that's always the problem with very precise parametric apps. On the other side, they can do stuff Blender can't do, or vice versa. It's always a give and take. Okay, so this looks pretty good. We can keep it this way. Everything is well named. So let's say this is actually pipe. There's our other part. The last element I would like to do, we have super sharp cuts. So let's save this first. Raw 2. And we want to have a little bit of an edge rounding. So we want at the end of our stack to add the bevel modifier. Maybe let's say 2 millimeters angle, and here clamp we can turn off. Let's zoom in a little bit. Okay. This doesn't look or this isn't very realistic, but again, if we zoom in there, you can see it, but from a distance, you can't really see it. What we do here right now is communicate a concept. And for rendering purpose, you see these small highlights work really, really well. This is all we need. Because later in Fusion, we just can, in the same manner as we constructed the design in Blender, we can then add the bevel in the way how we want. So here we do the same. The bevel at the end. Did I move the object? No, it just flickered for a second. So 2 millimeters only along the angle, so our sharp edges. And let's turn clamp off. And this is happening. Oh, this is interesting. So this is good this happened, because I can show you how to fix this. So what you see there is basically the result where maybe somewhere 1 or 2 edges overlap, and then a certain command gets cranky. And this is probably due to the Boolean parts. This is actually, let's say here, the bottom trim. And I have my suspicion if I move the fillet up, this might fix it. Well, I was right. Perfect. So it was easier for the software to simply take the whole object and then we bevel it and then we just chop it off. We end up with a sharp edge there, but no, that is fine. This is just for rendering. Okay, good. So there we have now all this stuff done. And this basically concludes the modeling of these details in Blender. Again, because everything is parametric and generative, and because we share the master body, we can go ahead into whatever object. Let's say, for example, S and Y, adjust those a little bit, leave edit mode, and all other objects are instantly updated. So pretty nice how we can automate those design changes.